Good day to you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Film Focus, episode 220, the double review for the Odyssey and Spider-Man Brand New Day. Well, hello there, ladies and gents of the North, South, East and West, and welcome to a new episode of Film Focus. I am your host, the Hypersonic55, and I am glad that you decided to join me once again for some film-related discussion. And yes, once again, I have left this podcast for a considerable amount of time, and for that I have to apologize. Again, I did not plan to disappear. I had plans to talk about so many things. I've seen a bunch of films since I stopped recording back in May, I think. And I wanted to talk about all sorts, from Mortal Kombat 2 to Disclosure Day to The Furious, from Backrooms to Obsession and a few other bits and bobs in between. I had plenty to talk about, it's just that time was not on my side, man. But with some of these releases in July, there was no way I wasn't going to talk about them. So even though this first review is a little late, I have to talk about The Odyssey. I've seen it twice. In IMAX. I've never seen anything in IMAX more than once, which is ridiculous. So you know it's good if I'm going back to see it on a big screen in that format. I haven't had the pleasure of being able to see it in the BFI IMAX in Waterloo because that place is too booked out. Ain't no one getting in there. It's under lock and key because everyone and their grandmother went to the IMAX to go back and see that film. But, you know, more power to The Odyssey though. That word of mouth was strong and everybody's decided to check it out. But the most recent film that I wanted to talk about on this podcast is Spider-Man Brand New Day. You guys know from my previous episode when I talked about the my super hype for the film based on that first trailer and my overall love for Spider-Man, there was no way I was going to let that slide on this podcast. I had to talk about it. And that is also a film I've seen twice. So as we do with these double episodes, I'll talk about The Odyssey first and then talk about Spider-Man afterwards. As per usual, there's no spoilers here. I keep it spoiler free because I want you to experience the film as best as you can. But I have a lot of enthusiasm for both films. So I want to talk about them. So let's start with The Odyssey. So from the time that The Odyssey was announced, I was super enthused, especially about the cast that had been assembled. But I was also very curious to see what Christopher Nolan's take on a Greek epic would look like with his film sensibilities, his style, and what that kind of film would look like in 2026, because we don't tend to get a lot of those these days. They've been largely absent from the cinema for a while. And then the first teaser trailer came out and I was like, this is pretty cool, nice and moody, you're not getting too much in the way of details. But then when they showed that extended sequence during Avatar 3, oh my gosh, that whole sequence of the Trojan horse with the invasion, ooh, that was so good. I was like, this is pushing it up to possibly my most anticipated film of 2026. It was high up there. I think it was battling with Doom Part 3, to be honest. But yeah, having coming out of it now, seeing it twice, I can definitely say that this film is an experience and a half. So when it comes to the plot, it's interesting. It's one of two halves. On the one hand, you have the journey and adventures of Odysseus. You see his journey through the Trojan War and then his attempt to get home, running into different islands with different challenges that him and his men have to overcome. But then on the other side of the ocean, you have his hometown of Ithaca, where you have his wife and son, Penelope and Telemachus, trying to fend off the bunch of suitors who want Penelope's hand in marriage and want to take over Ithaca as the new king. And these guys are holding out hope that Odysseus will come back and bring order to everything. And that is a way for me to summarize the plot without going into the area of spoilers. I thought this film was fabulous. I thought the story was compelling, very interesting, and allows you to really stop and think about a lot of what's happening on screen. With this world, you expect there to be a certain level of fantasy, otherworldliness, obviously magic, and gods. However, there's this interesting balance that Nolan finds where you can either believe in this or you can believe that this is what these people perceive to be magic or gods. So it's almost left to the audience to interpret how not only they feel, but also how the characters feel about what's happening in the film, which is pretty cool. I like that this film is fairly moody, melancholic, dark, gritty, strange, and otherworldly, and sometimes ventures into the horror territory with certain things that happen. It's very intense, and at certain times, especially watching it the first time, you're just sort of on the edge of your seat, just trying to take it all in and hope that you don't get a heart attack from all the stuff that's going on. And much like the best kind of films, you don't feel the runtime. I know that there are some people that said that the film started to lag a little in the middle, but I found myself completely engrossed. I let the film wash over me and I was having a good ass time. And I like how this film is about actions and consequences. And it's interesting to see how certain characters have actions that affect other people, which makes them want to do other things, either to them or for them. I'm not intimately familiar with the Odyssey. I've seen pieces of it adapted in various different media over the years. And I know there's a lot of people online that said, oh yeah, we all read the Odyssey in school. I'm like, who's this we? I remember a certain amount from my English class, but I don't remember learning about the Odyssey. I think maybe if I'd taken English literature in GCSE, I might have come across it, but that was not part of my English repertoire in my classes back in secondary school. So yeah, I don't know what that's all about. But I think Nolan found a way to add his signature sort of flavor when it comes to the characters, the story, especially when it comes to the non-linear nature of the film, where you get bits and pieces of what's happening in a sort of fragmented manner. And then as the film moves forward, certain things that you weren't so sure about or you were questioning start to come into context. And by the time you get to the end, where certain things come to pass, the satisfaction level is so high. Oh my gosh. It's been very long since I had a film that made me feel like this. So yeah, story overall, good time was had. Okay, and now it's time to talk about the cast, and they were all stellar. There were no wasted performances in here, and it shouldn't come as a surprise because, again, Christopher Nolan has always been very good at making good use of his cast, and everybody in this film were great, though some people definitely stood out more so than others. And I was hoping to see a few other actors have a little bit more to do in the story overall, but again, everybody played their parts pretty well. So let me just run down the main people that stood out to me. Matt Damon, he was reliably great as Odysseus, as a man who has a strategic mind. He's known as this very capable and knowledgeable fighter. But then as you go through the film, you see a different side of him, see him come to terms with his actions and how that would have affected not only his people, but also his family and possibly the gods as well. It was fascinating to watch. And again, Damon, he was really good. His physique was insane. And he just had this really cool presence on screen. But there was also like this humanity that he brought to the role, which was really good as well. And then you have Tom Holland as Telemachus, and I thought he was pretty good. He was a son of Odysseus, and he is a dude longing for his father, but also wanting to take responsibility and try to deal with the cretins who are in his house and trying to basically get with his mother. I thought Holland was pretty good. This is probably some of the best acting we've seen from him so far. I know a lot of people just tend to associate him with just Spider-Man, but he has done a bunch of other projects here and there. And I think he's always shown potential to do more dramatic roles. And with this film, I would say he only gets better as the film goes on. And by the end, I was like, yeah, I'm very much in the zone with you, Holland. You did a pretty good job. But one of the standouts in this film was Anne Hathaway as Penelope. Good God, she was incredible. Like, wow. I've liked Anne Hathaway. I haven't seen all of her movies, but the films that I have seen her in, I've liked. But this is easily some of the best acting she's ever done, ever. There's so much that she does with her face. There's a quiet intensity to what she does. She can be subtle, she can be soft, she can let her guard down, but then there's other times where she can get very aggressive and intense, and oh my gosh, just absolutely stellar performance. Some of her interactions with some of the other actors was stellar. And then you have Robert Pattinson as, you know what, this is probably going to be a butchering of the name, but Antonius? God, I'm probably butchering that, I'm sorry. But he plays basically the main suitor who's trying to get with Penelope. And he is just the worst kind of craphead ever. Just a slimy, sleazy dude doing all sorts to try and piss you off. And he's there with his little suitor mates just saying snide comments and plotting. And you can see that this guy, he's up to no good. You hate him, but he's so good at it. Pattinson is definitely an acting chameleon. He can play all sorts of roles. He can be charming, he can be dashing, he can be awkward and dorky, but then he could also just be the worst kind of creep ever. And he was so good in this film. And I would also say the other standout actor for me in this film was John Leguizamo. And he was like Emmaus? God, again, I'm butchering these names. But basically, he was the blind guy who was loyal to Odysseus and his family. And the performance he turned in this film was absolutely incredible. And you were completely locked in every time that he was speaking. And there's certain moments in the film where he just acts his arse off in some subtle ways and some more explosive ways. But he was incredible. Easily the best performance he's ever done. And I really hope he does get at least some nomination for Best Supporting Actor, or at least something, because he was so good. And Charlize Theron and Zendaya, they were pretty good as Calypso and Athena. Utilized well in the film, and they really stood out in their moments in the movie. I also like John Bernthal as Menelaus, at least I think that's how you say his name. He was pretty cool, and again, he has some cool interactions with some of the other characters. And Hamish Patel, our boy Tamwa from EastEnders, man. I'm so glad to see him in this film. I enjoyed seeing him in Tenet, but he had a more substantial role in this film, and his interactions with Matt Damon and a bunch of Odysseus's men was really good. Again, I'm so happy to see this boy just excelling, doing well, and just playing a really good part in this film. And Elliot Page as Zenon, I quite liked their role as well. It was not the part that some people on the internet expected it to be, but I enjoyed that it was a key role and one that worked well. I thought they did a fabulous job in that film. And Benny Safdie as Agamemnon, oh my gosh. For a guy that you don't really get to see his face, he stood out in that battle armor looking like the coolest mofo ever. And I understand why the internet keeps going on about his aura, because he literally barely does anything. He just has to stand there in that armor and you're paying attention. And shout out also to Corey Hawkins. He's one of Robert Pattinson's little friends who's just the worst kind of individual. You want to see this guy get his. And Corey Hawkins was damn good in this. And yeah, Samantha Morton as Cersei. Oh wow, she stood out. Again, I can't say what she does, but when you see her in the film, you'll know why. Really, really good. And Lupita Nyong'o, she played Helena Troy and her twin sister, whose name I'm not going to try and say out loud. But I thought she was good for the time that she was in the film. I was just hoping that she was going to be there a little bit more. And now we move on to the presentation, and good gravy. The presentation for this film is damn good. Visually, this film is very impressive. The camera is pulled back in a way where you really feel the vastness of the locations, especially when you're in those sequences when you're out in the ocean in the boat, or when you see these characters so helpless against some of these larger-than-life forces that are literally just massacring you left, right, and center. But I love the costume design, the armor looked really cool, and the interior locations have a certain level of sophistication when it comes to how they were set up. These environments feel like they're lived in. They have a really nice aesthetic to them. The lighting is really cool. I know some people complained about this film being too dark at certain points, but I didn't really have an issue with it. But there's a practicality to everything that it feels tactile, that you could reach out and touch it for the most part. There was definitely digital effects used here and there, but the visual design of this film is really good. You get all sorts of interesting colors and lighting, and certain scenarios where things get really strange and freaky. The cinematography is so nice, and the way some of the action is shot, it's just very good. Is some long takes of certain sequences where you're running around with characters as the camera is still going when you travel from one side of the room to another, or are running with the characters as like some crazy stuff is happening in the background. It's all just very well put together. And the music by my boy Ludwig Göransson, he's so good. I will admit, the first time I watched the film, I was like, there's certain themes in here that I like, but there's nothing that's, standing out as much as some of his previous scores to me. But upon watching it the second time round, I was like, oh, you know what? No, this music really is pretty good. And I still need to listen to it in its entirety. But I would say, of the three scores that he's done with Nolan so far, when it goes back to Tenet and Oppenheimer, I'm not too sure. I feel like this one might resonate with me more than Oppenheimer, but I'm not sure about Tenet. It's been a while since I've watched Tenet or listened to that film score, so I might have to check that out. But Ludwig creates interesting sounds for several of the scenarios that the characters are in, and it varies between these soft and subtle, moody, melancholic kind of sounds, but then at the same time he implements certain instrumentation that you would definitely not associate with this sort of style of film or this era that they're in. But it works so well in this sort of pulse-pounding, different yet effective musical score. He can do no wrong in my eyes. Ludwig is wonderful. So yeah, overall, the Odyssey is just fab. I've had a damn good time with it. It's not been since Dune Part 2 probably that I've watched a film that really resonated with me on such a high frequency that I had to see it again. And I've seen it twice. I definitely want to see it again, and I would hopefully get to see it for the third time in the 70mm IMAX, but we'll see. Fingers crossed for me. But if not, then I'll probably just try to catch it on like a smaller scale IMAX. But if you haven't seen the Odyssey yet, please go out and watch it. Support this film, because there's not many creators like Christopher Nolan out there who can push out their singular vision and turn it into reality that can be this unique, strange, and compelling, and make you want to talk to a bunch of other people about it. I know this film hasn't resonated with everybody in that same level, and to each their own, but for some of the people moaning about like historical accuracy or how much it works when compared to the original source material and this, that, and the other, you can dislike something as long as you have logical reasons for it, but some people are literally just bitching for no reason. I'm just like, just be quiet. No one wants to hear you. Alright, so now I'm going to be switching gears towards Spider-Man Brand New Day. Now, from the time that this film was announced, I was very curious to see what the overall film would look like, because there was a lot of hype but also a lot of concern. Going off of the end of Spider-Man No Way Home, it looked like we were getting a return to a classic form of Spider-Man storytelling where Peter Parker, he'd be on his own, gallivanting in his red and blue suit, doing the superhero thing with a super identity, but not having the attributes and people to rely upon that he's had in the MCU. Because as much as I love Tom Holland and his version of Peter Parker and Spider-Man, he has had a lot of additional help that Tobey and Andrew's Spider-Man did not have. They were way more self-made individuals and pulled themselves up from nothing to become the heroes that they were in their movies. And Tom, he just had a lot of extra help in his films, so I can understand why some people weren't messing with him in the same way as the previous two Spider-Men. But this new film promised something of a more return to form and not having to deal with more intergalactic or larger than life threats, which was always cool. The first trailer really set my soul ablaze because it had so many interesting visuals, a lot of cool and beautiful things which was happening, and the appearances of several individuals who I was just like, how the hell are they going to make this work? But with the amount of characters and potential like plot points here and there was reason to believe that this could be a potentially bloated mess. So I was concerned but still hyped. And plus I was just wondering what Destin Daniel Cretton would bring to this film as the new director, as opposed to John Watts, who had stepped away from Spider-Man to work on other projects. And considering that Shang-Chi is one of my favorite films in the MCU post-Endgame, I wanted to see if he added a lot of that action flavor to Spider-Man. And this film, it ended up being something special for me. So let's just talk about the plot. So this film takes place a number of years after the end of No Way Home, and Peter Parker is fully committed to the life of being Spider-Man, saving New York on numerous occasions from various different levels of threats. He has become loved by the city, and you can see that he enjoys being the superhero and doing the right thing. However, you can see that this lifestyle of being alone, having to fight people on numerous occasions, is taking a physical and mental toll on him. And he's also having to deal with the fact that because of the wish that he made with Doctor Strange in the last film, nobody remembers who he is, and he also has to suffer watching his former best friend and girlfriend living their lives in university while he is watching from the distance via his phone. And you can see that that's causing him a great deal of pain. And then on top of that, the amount of stress that he's dealing with living this lifestyle has led to him having a metamorphosis with his abilities, which obviously causes a bit of a spanner in the works. And then add on top of that, you have this new adversary that has a power set that he's never seen, and he's not sure how to approach it while dealing with these other elements that's causing him a lot of trouble. So it's about him trying to navigate this new version of himself while fighting a new type of enemy that is very hard to take down. And that's a way for me to summarize the film without going into the area of spoilers. I quite enjoyed this film because it had a certain level of drama and maturity that not only hasn't been seen in the previous Tom Holland films, but some of it hasn't really been viewed in the previous live action ones. The focus on the lonely superhero and the toll that takes on somebody, it was a fascinating watch for me. The focus on the need for connection, evolution, and persevering in the face of adversity, that stuff was really well handled. There are several moments for either Peter on his own or him interacting with certain characters where you just get to see characters just talking, expressing themselves, and sharing their emotional vulnerabilities in ways that you don't get to see too much in certain comic book movies. But also some of the issues that the characters are dealing with are similar to stuff that people are dealing with in real life. Obviously, none of us are actual superheroes running around fighting crime with superpowered abilities, but some of the issues that they're dealing with in this film are relatable, and it's those core elements that do make these characters more compelling. And just seeing Peter's story play out in the way in which it does, with all of these moments of intensity, of melancholy, of suffering, and some intense moments, it's just really good. And just tonally, this film feels like the most comic booky Spider-Man film I've seen so far, and I mean that in the best way possible. Again, because of the eras of when the previous films were made, there was a certain level of realism or a certain level of restrictedness that they had when it came to portraying certain situations, tones, costumes, or scenarios on screen. But in this film, this was like the most comic booky version of Spider-Man in live action for me. And I was vibing with it so hard. It was so fun. There were certain sequences towards the front end of the film, towards the middle, and towards the end as well, where I'm just like, this is literally just ripping, scenarios and pages from comics and then just putting them on screen. I was having a good ass time with it. And the film, despite the more mature and darker nature of some of the events, it found its time for humor as well. And there were definitely some really fun moments between Peter and some of the other characters that really resonated with me. Some, cameos or some other smaller characters get to have their moments to shine as well. I will say the humor in this film wasn't as funny as I expected it to be. And for some of you who watch this podcast or listen to this podcast, you know that I'm a very fickle person when it comes to humor anyway. But there were moments where I was expecting to laugh a little bit more. I would definitely say Homecoming is probably still my favorite when it comes to the humor, just because of the interactions between Ned and Peter, or Martin Starr as their old teacher, or some of the interactions between the school kids. some of that stuff was incredible. Oh my god. So in this film, there are definitely some great moments. A lot of them happen to do with Spider-Man and Punisher, but also Zendaya gets some great moments as well, and Jacob Batalon as Ned, he's still wonderful too. So yeah, there's definitely moments of humor that still work, but it wasn't as crazy funny as some of the other Spider-Man films that have preceded it. And then there was the characters. I really liked the cast in this film. I thought they all did a good job. Like the Odyssey, there was a few other people who I'd hoped to see a little bit more of in here, but I feel like everybody who was in the film did a good job. Like Tom Holland as Peter Parker / Spider-Man. What can be said about him that hasn't been said already? He's so good. You can feel the commitment he has to this role, and you can see that he puts a lot of effort into it. Not only the physicality of the movements, but also his facial expressions. There's a lot of emoting that he has to do with his face in certain scenes, and it's really good. And you can tell that this is a Peter Parker who has been through it. He has lived a life of highs and lows, and he's experiencing, that sort of more adult side of superheroing. So there's the good, there's the bad, and then there's the painful that comes with it. He's a weary dude who's still trying to find a way to do the right thing, but also put everyone else's needs before his, which means that his needs aren't met and he's suffering for it. And Holland, man, so good. And then you have Zendaya as MJ. Her character, Michelle Jones, I quite enjoyed her. She has some different stuff going on in this film, obviously, given the nature that she doesn't remember Peter anymore, but her scenes with not only Ned, but some of the other characters in this film were pretty good. And there were some really important scenes in this film where, again, you can see why people like her as an actress, because she just knows how to turn it on when it comes to acting and just give a really good performance. And then you have Sadie Sink, who I quite enjoyed in this film. For a little while, I was wondering, is she playing who I think she's playing, or is it someone else? But then when you see it in the film, you're like, okay, interesting. But I thought she was great. She was this very mysterious character, and then when you see what's revealed and why she's doing what she's doing, you're like, okay, makes sense. But I really loved her in the role. Again, she's able to show a certain level of versatility when it comes to her performance. Again, I'm trying to be super vague with this. Eventually, you'll know within about a few weeks, because Marvel normally like to, ruin the surprise with certain stuff after about like a couple weeks of it being out. You might even know who she's playing by the time that this is out, but she was good. Really good in her role. And Jacob Batalon as Ned, he's still just as delightful as ever. He has great comedic timing, and there's just certain stuff that he says or does physically that just makes me happy, so he was really good. And John Bernthal as Frank Castle, aka Punisher. I really liked him in this film. There's a way that they found that balance between him still being that super aggressive, loose cannon, very focused on doing things his own way, and basically wanting to just run through anyone who gets in his path. But I also found that there was a way that they put him in this film and allowed him to show a few sides of the character that you haven't seen in live action before. And Punisher and Spider-Man's interactions were frigging amazing. Even though this is like the first time you've seen this pairing in live action, there's a rhythm and cadence to their conversation where you feel like you've seen them interacting for a while before they come on screen. So there's like a history there that feels authentic, and the back and forth between those guys were absolutely fab. So good. And the appearance of Florence Pugh as Black Widow, she was great. And Mark Ruffalo's version of Bruce Banner and the Hulk were used to great effect as well, especially the Bruce Banner stuff, because again, there was some really fun conversation between him and Peter, which I enjoyed. And Tremel Tillman, who a lot of you guys might know from Severance, shout out to my boy Milchek, but he was great as Bill Metzger, as one of the other people that Spider-Man interacts with. I thought he was pretty good in this film. And the other person other couple of people I wanted to mention, Michael Mando finally coming back as Scorpion was great. I just wish I got to see more of him. And then there was Lisa Colon-Zayas. I'm not great at saying her name, but some of you guys might know her from The Bear. I love her in that show. She played a police officer called Jean DeWolf. She was really fun in this film. She was utilized just enough to be memorable, and I liked her in this film. And then you have the presentation, which is really, really good. Visually, I quite like this film, especially when it comes to the web swinging. I know that there's been a lot of debate online about which Spider-Man films has the best web swinging. And unfortunately, Tom Holland's has always come in last because he's not really done that much in the way of web swinging, especially in the environments that Tobey and Andrew got to have in their previous films. Whereas in this film, you can see that they really leaned into utilizing New York for all of this web swinging stuff, and there is all sorts of material that we get to see. This film, especially when it comes to not only the web swinging but Spider-Man's actions, when it comes to him jumping, attacking and interacting with the environment, it feels like an amalgamation of all sorts of Spider-Man stuff that's come before. So you get bits of the Tom Holland stuff, you get bits of the Tobey films, you get bits of the Andrew films, but you also get bits of like the PlayStation games as well. There are certain visual imagery that if you're familiar with certain Spider-Man media and comics, you'll be able to notice certain things straight away. And I was grinning and giggling like a silly little boy at some of these like little references. Some of this stuff is big, some of it's small. But again, if you're a fan of Spider-Man media in multi forms, then you'll see all sorts of cool references that they were able to put in here. And the web swinging, you get to see it from so many different angles, from inside the suit, POV shots, close-ups, and you can see that they used a combination of CGI, some wire work, some green screen and all sorts to make this New York feel crazy big. But also you get to see Spider-Man swinging around in unique ways that again we've not seen him do before, and utilize those webs to get all over the place in very interesting ways. And when it comes to him fighting, this is probably the most acrobatic that we've seen of Spider-Man so far when it comes to fighting individuals. From, the superpowered ones to your regular dudes, Spider-Man is jumping, twisting, flipping all over the place, and you can definitely tell that this film has a martial arts influence, not only because of the appearance of the hand, but Spider-Man just seems way more versatile and athletic. He jumps and twists and uses his webs and punches and kicks and, arachnid jumping abilities to move in ways that I've never seen before. And it's just, wow, that's really cool. There's even some fun camera work at certain points where I'm like, again, I've never seen Spider-Man depicted this way in live action, and I love it. It's so cool. And then you have the music. My boy Michael Giacchino returns once more to create a new score for Spider-Man. And it's interesting because this score in a lot of ways has those core elements that you know from the previous films, but it's almost like they stripped out a chunk of it and then created a whole new sound for Peter Parker to work with, where you can feel the weight of the drama in this. There's some changes to the instrumentation, and there's totally different sounds that are done in this film that represent where Peter Parker and Spider-Man are at this point in their lives. Things are a little darker, a little bit more dangerous, a little bit sadder, but there's also that element of hope in there as well. And by the end of it, I'm just like, yo, this score is pretty darn good. It might be my favorite because I like the sounds of the previous Spider-Man films, but I would say that this one, again, because of the emotional journey that Peter Parker goes on, it just resonates a little higher once you get to the end of the film. So yeah, in the end, Spider-Man Brand New Day is a darn good film. I think that what they do with the story, the characters, the comic book tone, the visual and audio presentation is stellar. I can understand some people's shortcomings with the film in terms of how it handles the story, certain pacing stuff, and how there are certain things implemented into the film that some people probably wish hadn't been there. But For me, I see those issues, but they didn't bother me as much. I feel like this is the next evolution of the character that I was always hoping for once we got to the end of No Way Home. And I am very, very curious to see where this universe goes after this, because there's a lot of interesting directions that we're looking at right now. And I guess we'll also have to see what happens after Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars, because depending on how Marvel decide to maneuver this could have like some pretty notable implications for Peter going ahead. But we shall see. Again, this is like, big man speculation at the moment. But now I turn it over to you, ladies and gentlemen. What did you think of the Odyssey, and what did you think of Spider-Man Brand New Day? Did you like them? Did you dislike them? Do you think they were okay? Let me know in the comment section below. Right now, the Odyssey is easily my favorite thing of the year, and I didn't think anything would pass the Furious or the drama when I saw those at the time, but the Odyssey is just a special case. With Spider-Man Brand New Day, trying to figure out where that is in my top 10 right now, it might have entered the top 5. It probably is in my top 5, but I'd have to manage that against the other films in there. But I'm very curious to see what happens with Dune Part 3, as that's my last big major film that I'm just like, I need this to be good. I'm still excited for Resident Evil and Street Fighter, but those films could go one of two ways, so I don't know, we'll see. But yeah, let me know what you thought of both films in the comment section below, or hit me up on Instagram or TikTok, where we are at Film Focus. And yeah, if you just want to find me, I'm just Hypersonic55 on the internets. And thank you for listening as always. I really appreciate you coming back. If you are coming back, or if you're new, welcome. Hopefully you enjoy what you hear and you want to listen to my other thoughts on other things. But until the next time, this is me signing out. Peace.